The Apache chief ordered, "Marry my cursed daughter or die." When he lifted the veil, he froze. The traveler walked slowly along the dusty path that led to the village. His clothes were worn and his shoes were covered in the red dirt of the plains. He had been walking for days, moving from one small settlement to another, searching for work and a place to rest. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the hills, and he could feel the warmth of the evening sun on his back. His stomach growled, reminding him that he had not eaten since morning, but the village ahead promised a chance to rest and maybe find a meal. As he approached the edge of the village, he noticed that the atmosphere was strange. Birds had stopped singing, and the wind seemed to carry an unusual stillness. The small wooden huts were arranged in a circle, and in the center stood a larger building that looked like the chief's house. The traveler slowed his steps, unsure of what awaited him. He had visited many villages before, but something about this place made him uneasy. The villagers were watching him from behind the walls of their huts, peeking with cautious eyes. Their faces were serious, and no one came forward to greet him. He tried to appear calm. "Hello," he called softly, hoping to break the silence. A few children peeked from behind their mothers, then quickly ducked away when the adults noticed. The traveler felt a chill run down his spine. It was as if the village itself was holding its breath. He took a deep breath and stepped closer to the center, where he saw the chief standing outside the largest hut. The chief was a tall man with strong shoulders and a presence that demanded attention. His hair was dark and long, tied back neatly, and his eyes were sharp, almost piercing. The traveler instinctively straightened his back, feeling both nervous and respectful. The chief's gaze seemed to look right through him, as if he could see every thought and intention. Around the chief, a few men of the village stood quietly, their faces serious, their hands resting on wooden staffs. "You have come to our village," the chief said, his voice calm but firm. "You are far from home." "Why have you come?" The traveler swallowed hard and tried to explain. "I am a traveler," he said. "I seek rest and food. I mean no harm to your people." The chief's eyes narrowed slightly, and the traveler felt a weight settle on his shoulders. The silence that followed was heavy, as if the chief was deciding whether to believe him or not. Then, unexpectedly, the chief spoke again, his voice carrying authority. "You have arrived at an important time. There is a matter that concerns your life and the life of my daughter." The traveler's heart skipped a beat. He had heard stories of strange customs in distant villages, but he had never faced a situation where a stranger's fate was tied to the chief's family. I do not understand," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. The chief motioned for him to step closer. "My daughter is not like other children. She carries a curse. Many have tried to be near her and none have remained unharmed. You must make a choice. Marry her or your life will be forfeit." The traveler froze. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the words. A curse, marriage, death. It all sounded like a nightmare. He looked around at the villagers, hoping to see someone smile or shake their head, but everyone's faces were serious, confirming the chief's words. Fear gripped him, but curiosity and the need to survive kept him rooted to the spot. I cannot decide so quickly," he stammered. "I do not know her. How can I marry someone I have never met?" The chief's eyes were steady, unwavering. "The choice is not yours to delay. Time is short and the law of our people is clear. You may run, but the mountains and plains beyond this village are no longer safe for you." There is no escape. The traveler's heart pounded. He had traveled alone for so long, facing dangers and hardships, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. The words of the chief echoed in his mind. "Marry the cursed daughter or die." He tried to think of a plan, any plan, but his thoughts were clouded with fear. Despite the tension, he could not help but notice the villagers around him. They were not hostile, but there was a solemn respect in their eyes. It was clear that the daughter, whoever she was, held a powerful place in their lives. He wondered what kind of person could bring such fear and reverence from an entire village. As he stood there trying to calm his racing heart, he realized that the chief was watching him closely, waiting for a response. The traveler knew he had little choice but to comply for the moment. He nodded slowly, hoping that by agreeing to meet the daughter, he might find a way to survive and understand the truth behind the curse. The chief motioned for him to follow. "Come, you will meet my daughter," he said. The traveler obeyed, walking toward the large hut in the center of the village. With each step, he felt the weight of the villagers' eyes upon him, their silent judgment and curiosity pressing down like the sun overhead. Inside the hut, the air was cooler, and the smell of wood smoke and herbs filled his senses. The chief led him to a small room, dimly lit by the late afternoon sun filtering through a wooden screen. There, standing in the shadows, was a figure draped in a long cloak. The traveler's heart skipped again. This must be the daughter. She moved forward slowly, her presence quiet but commanding. The cloak hid much of her face, but her eyes were visible, deep, dark, and full of emotion. Fear, sadness, and a hint of defiance mixed in her gaze, making the traveler unsure of what to expect. The chief stepped aside, giving them space, his expression unreadable. "You will speak with her," the chief said. "Learn who she is before your decision is made. But remember, the choice comes with no delay." The traveler nodded, stepping closer, though every step felt like it carried the weight of destiny itself. He could feel the tension in the air, a mixture of fear and anticipation that made his stomach churn. The daughter's eyes met his, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. She spoke first, her voice soft but steady. "You have been told about me," she said. "Do not let fear cloud your mind. There is more to this story than you know." The traveler swallowed hard, unsure what to say. He had expected something terrifying, someone monstrous, or at least strange. Instead, he found a young woman whose sadness and strength were both clear. Her words hinted at secrets he could not yet understand, but they also gave him a small sense of hope. I do not know what to think," he admitted. "I have heard tales, but I do not know if they are true." She nodded, a small, almost invisible smile touching her lips. "Stories often grow larger than truth. You will see for yourself soon enough. Be careful what you believe, traveler, for what you see is not always all that exists." The traveler felt a mixture of relief and deeper confusion. The curse, the warnings, the threat of death, all of it pressed on him, but so did the unexpected humanity and presence of the daughter. He realized that his journey had brought him here for a reason, though he did not yet understand it. The chief's eyes remained on them from the doorway, silent but watchful. The villagers, now gathering outside, peered in quietly, their interest barely contained. The traveler understood that his decision would not only affect him but also the lives of many around him. As the evening light faded and the first stars appeared in the sky, the traveler knew he was standing at the edge of a choice that could change everything. Fear, curiosity, and a strange sense of destiny swirled together, making his heart pound and his thoughts race. He had arrived at the village seeking rest, but he had found a test that would challenge not only his courage but his understanding of truth, superstition, and life itself. For the first time in his long journey, he felt truly alive, aware that every step he took from now on could lead to unimaginable consequences. The future, uncertain and filled with mystery, waited for him in the presence of the chief, the villagers, and the daughter whose eyes seemed to hold both sorrow and secrets. The traveler knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The traveler spent the night in a small room near the chief's hut. Though the room was simple, with wooden walls and a straw mat on the floor, it felt safer than sleeping outside. Yet sleep did not come easily. His mind was restless, filled with thoughts of the chief's warning and the daughter he had only briefly seen. He could not stop thinking about her eyes, the sadness, the strength, and the strange quiet power she seemed to hold. Even in his imagination, they followed him, haunting his thoughts as if they were calling him to understand something he did not yet know. At dawn, the village stirred to life. Smoke curled from chimneys, and the sound of children laughing and women calling to each other filled the air. The traveler walked cautiously through the narrow dirt paths, observing the daily life around him. Villagers worked in the fields, tending to crops and animals, but there was a sense of caution in the way they moved, as if each action was measured. He realized that everyone in the village was connected to the daughter's story in some way. Even the youngest children seemed to understand that she was special, and their playful voices carried a hint of respect, almost fear that he had never experienced before. By mid-morning, the chief summoned the traveler again. "It is time," he said, leading him toward a small courtyard behind the main hut. The traveler's heart raced. He knew that this was the moment when he would truly meet the daughter and begin to understand the truth behind the curse. The courtyard was filled with flowers and herbs growing in neat rows, and the air smelled of fresh earth and sweet blossoms. Despite the beauty, the traveler felt tension pressing down on him, a reminder that nothing about this meeting would be ordinary. The daughter appeared, moving gracefully among the plants. She wore a simple dress of woven cloth, her hair flowing freely over her shoulders. Her face was calm, but her eyes held a depth that made the traveler feel both drawn and cautious. He noticed that she moved with care, as if every step she took was intentional, and the way she looked at the plants suggested a connection to life that went beyond ordinary understanding. "You have questions," she said softly, not as a warning but as a simple truth. "I can see them in your eyes, but know this, fear can be the most dangerous curse of all. It can cloud judgment, make you weak, and lead to choices you will regret." The traveler nodded, unsure how to respond. He had questions too many to count, but he did not know where to begin. I am told that you are cursed," he said carefully. "People say that anyone who comes close to you is harmed or disappears. I do not know what to believe." The daughter smiled faintly, almost sadly. "Stories grow with time," she said. "People fear what they do not understand. The curse they speak of is not what you think. It is a warning, yes, but also a shield. I have lived many years with it. The world outside this village has not been kind to me. The curse is both truth and legend." The traveler listened carefully. Her words were cautious, but there was honesty in them. He felt a strange sense of relief mixed with curiosity. He wanted to know more, but he also sensed that she would reveal nothing that she did not choose to share. "Why are you so feared?" he asked. "What is it that makes people believe in this curse?" The daughter paused, looking down at her hands. "It is not what I do, but what surrounds me," she said quietly. "Many have come with their own intentions, greed, pride, desire. Those who have been harmed were never harmed by me, but by their own choices. My presence reflects what they bring to it. The curse is a name given to consequences, but not everyone understands that." The traveler tried to understand her words. They were puzzling but also made a strange kind of sense. He realized that perhaps the fear was less about her and more about what people expected from her and themselves. It was not the curse itself that was dangerous, but the misunderstanding, the assumptions, and the fear that followed. As the morning passed, the daughter showed him around the small courtyard, explaining the plants and herbs that grew there. She spoke of their uses in medicine, in food, and in daily life, her voice calm and confident. The traveler noticed the care with which she handled each plant, as if she understood them in a way that went beyond simple knowledge. Her connection to the life around her seemed to confirm what she had said, that the so-called curse was not in her, but in the world's perception of her. The traveler began to see her in a new light. She was not frightening or strange. She was careful, wise, and full of quiet strength. Yet the stories he had heard could not be ignored. He could see why outsiders might fear her. The village itself seemed to revolve around her presence, the people cautious, protective, and aware of the power she held. not in a supernatural sense, but in the way she influenced the balance of life around her. During their walk, the daughter spoke of her life in the village, the customs, and the traditions she had followed since childhood. She told stories of her father, the chief, and his wisdom in guiding the people. She spoke of moments of joy and sorrow, of learning to live with the expectations placed upon her. The traveler listened, fascinated by the depth of her experience, realizing that her life had been far from ordinary. He also noticed that, despite the warnings, she treated him with a mix of caution and kindness. There was no malice in her eyes, no desire to harm. Instead, she seemed curious about him, as if she were trying to understand why he had come and whether he could see her truth rather than the stories told by others. The traveler felt a connection forming, fragile but real, based on shared understanding rather than fear. As the sun climbed higher, villagers began to appear at the edges of the courtyard, watching from a distance. They did not interfere but observed quietly, their respect for the daughter clear. The traveler realized that the village's fear was not of her, but of the world outside, the judgments and misunderstandings that could follow anyone who was not careful. The daughter's life had been shaped by this delicate balance, and he felt a growing respect for her strength and resilience. By midday, the traveler and the daughter returned to the main hut. They sat quietly, sharing a simple meal of bread, roasted vegetables, and fresh water. The conversation was light at first, about the village, the weather, and the work of the day. Yet beneath the surface, there was a sense of caution and awareness, a careful navigation of trust and understanding. The traveler could feel the weight of the chief's words still lingering in his mind, but he also sensed that the daughter's presence offered something more, a chance to see beyond fear and legend into the truth of life in this remote place. As the afternoon sun began to lower in the sky, the traveler felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. He had learned much about the daughter, but there were still mysteries he did not understand. The curse, the stories, the warnings, all of it carried a weight that he could not yet measure. Yet for the first time, he felt that he might be able to face whatever came next with courage and clarity. The daughter stood and walked to the window, looking out at the village below. "You will have to make a choice soon," she said, her voice calm but firm. "It is not only your life at stake but the balance of the village, the lives of many who depend on it. Do not act out of fear. Understand first. See clearly. Only then can you decide." The traveler nodded, feeling the gravity of her words. He understood that this was more than a test of courage. It was a lesson in understanding, empathy, and the consequences of actions. The world outside had been harsh and unforgiving, but here, in this small village, he realized that wisdom, patience, and respect held power far greater than fear. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the traveler knew that his journey had reached a turning point. The daughter had shown him the first truth, that the so-called curse was not in her, but in the world's fear of the unknown. He had seen her strength, her kindness, and her quiet authority, and he knew that the days ahead would challenge him in ways he could not yet imagine. The village settled into evening, the sounds of life slowing as families gathered for dinner and the children played quietly. The traveler sat near the fire, reflecting on all he had learned. The daughter's words echoed in his mind, a gentle reminder that understanding comes before judgment, and courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to face it with clarity. For the first time since he had arrived at the village, the traveler felt a sense of purpose. He understood that his next actions would define not only his fate, but also the course of the lives around him. He did not yet know what the future held, but he knew that he would face it with open eyes and a steady heart. The night fell, bringing with it the quiet whispers of the wind through the trees and the soft glow of stars above. The traveler, though weary, felt a strange excitement. He had glimpsed the truth behind the stories, the humanity behind the fear, and the strength behind the legend. The days to come promised challenges and revelations, but he was ready to meet them, guided by the knowledge that courage and understanding could overcome even the deepest fears. The traveler woke early again, the morning light spilling into the small room where he had slept. His mind was restless, filled with questions about the daughter, the chief, and the so-called curse that surrounded her. Today, he was to prepare for the marriage, an idea that still felt unreal and frightening. He had never imagined that his journey would bring him to a place where such a decision would be forced upon him. Yet here he was, standing on the edge of a choice that could change his life forever. He stepped outside and found the village already alive with activity. Villagers moved quietly through the paths, their faces serious but calm. Some tended to the animals, while others carried baskets filled with fresh vegetables and herbs. The traveler noticed that their attention often flicked toward the main hut, as if they were waiting and watching for the events to unfold. Though they did not speak directly to him, their careful glances reminded him that everything about his presence here was important, that he was now a part of the rhythm of the village, whether he liked it or not. The chief appeared, as tall and commanding as ever, and motioned for the traveler to follow. "It is time to prepare," he said. "There are traditions you must understand and ways you must show respect. The ceremony is not only about you or my daughter, it is about the village and the life we have preserved for generations." The traveler followed, his steps slow but determined. He felt the weight of the chief's words pressing upon him. He had always traveled alone, making his own choices, but now he had been thrust into a world where his actions had consequences far beyond his understanding. The courtyard was bustling with activity, the daughter moving gracefully among the villagers as they prepared the area for the ceremony. She noticed him and nodded, a faint smile on her face. "You are learning quickly," she said softly. "But remember, it is not only your behavior that matters. Your heart and mind will be tested in ways you do not yet see. The world outside may be cruel, but here, honesty and understanding are the strongest tools you have." The traveler nodded, feeling both comforted and nervous. He watched as the villagers prepared decorations, arranged seating, and brought out ceremonial items that he did not fully understand. Every movement was deliberate, every placement careful. He realized that the ceremony was more than a formality. It was a reflection of the village's values, their respect for tradition, and the way they protected the balance of their lives. As he observed, he could not ignore the stories that had reached him before. Tales of men who had married the daughter and vanished, of those who had fallen ill or been haunted by strange visions. He wondered what part of these stories was true and what part was legend, and he struggled to reconcile the kind, calm presence of the daughter with the fear that surrounded her. Yet he also felt a growing curiosity. There was more to her life than the warnings suggested, and he wanted to know it. The chief approached him again. "You will wear these," he said, handing the traveler simple but finely made garments. "They show respect for the ceremony and for the people. You must learn the words and gestures that accompany them. There is no room for mistake, for a single error could disrupt the balance we maintain." The traveler nodded, accepting the garments. He changed quickly, the fabric unfamiliar against his skin, yet comfortable enough. As he adjusted the clothing, he could feel the eyes of the villagers upon him. Some were curious, others cautious, but all were observing. It struck him that in this village, every action, every choice had meaning. He was not merely a participant in a ceremony. He was stepping into a larger story, one that had been written long before he arrived. The daughter came closer, carrying a small basket of herbs and flowers. She handed one to the traveler, explaining its significance. "This flower is for protection," she said. "It is not magic, but intention matters. The village believes that when hearts are prepared and intentions are pure, the energy of life itself offers guidance. You must carry this not only in your hand but in your thoughts." The traveler nodded, holding the flower carefully. He felt a strange sense of calm in her words. They were simple, yet profound, reminding him that courage and respect were not only outward actions but also inward qualities. As they walked through the courtyard together, he felt a growing sense of connection, a fragile bond that was forming despite the weight of fear and expectation. Villagers began to gather, forming a circle around the area where the ceremony would take place. Children sat quietly at the edges, watching with wide eyes while the elders stood, their faces solemn but approving. The traveler could feel the energy of the village, a mix of anticipation, respect, and quiet tension. Every person seemed to understand the importance of the moment, yet no one forced their opinion upon him. He realized that this was a place where observation and understanding mattered more than words. The daughter guided him to a small wooden platform at the center of the courtyard. "Stand here," she said. "This is where the ceremony will begin. Watch carefully and follow my lead. Do not be afraid. The village is with us, and the choices you make today will be guided by honesty and respect." The traveler took a deep breath and stepped onto the platform. The wood was solid beneath his feet, and the air was filled with the scents of herbs, flowers, and earth. He felt the weight of the villagers' gaze, but also a sense of support. Though he had been frightened when he first arrived, he now felt a strange confidence, a growing understanding that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. The daughter began the ceremony with words he did not fully understand, speaking in a language that was both familiar and foreign. The villagers responded, their voices rising in a rhythm that felt ancient and powerful. The traveler listened carefully, trying to absorb every gesture, every word, every subtle movement. He realized that this was more than a ritual. It was a story, a history, and a test, all woven together. As the morning progressed, he was guided through the steps he needed to perform. Some were simple gestures of respect, others were symbolic acts representing life, trust, and commitment. Each time he faltered, the daughter's calm presence steadied him, her hands guiding his movements, her eyes offering reassurance. He felt a mixture of nervousness and gratitude. He had expected fear and danger, but what he experienced was a careful, deliberate process that demanded attention, focus, and respect. Between the steps, the daughter spoke to him quietly. "Do not let the stories frighten you," she said. "The curse is not in me, but in the misunderstanding of those who do not know us. The village watches, yes, but they also guide. Learn from them and you will see the truth." The traveler nodded. Her words were comforting, yet they carried a warning. He understood that the challenge before him was not simply to follow instructions, but to truly understand the balance of life, respect, and intention that the village upheld. It was a lesson in humility, patience, and awareness, qualities he had rarely needed during his travels but now found essential. As the afternoon sun climbed high in the sky, preparations continued. The villagers worked quietly, adjusting decorations, ensuring the ceremonial space was perfect. The traveler began to feel a strange sense of rhythm, as if he were becoming part of the life of the village. He noticed small details, the way a flower was placed, the care with which the food was prepared, the subtle gestures of respect exchanged between villagers. Every action carried meaning, and he realized that this ceremony was as much about teaching him as it was about the marriage itself. By the late afternoon, the ceremonial space was complete. The villagers stood ready, their faces serious but calm. The traveler, now dressed in the ceremonial garments, felt a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. He understood that soon he would face the culmination of the day's preparation, the meeting that would reveal the truth behind the daughter's life, the so-called curse, and his own choices. The daughter stood beside him, her presence steady and reassuring. "Soon, everything will be clear," she said. "The ceremony is a reflection of life, of choices, and of understanding. Watch closely, listen carefully, and act with honesty. Fear will cloud your judgment, but clarity will guide you." The traveler nodded, feeling a growing determination. He had learned much in a short time: the strength of the daughter, the wisdom of the chief, and the depth of the village's traditions. Yet he knew that the ultimate test was still ahead. The stories he had heard, the warnings he had received, and the fear that lingered in his mind would all meet reality soon. How he faced that moment would define the next chapter of his life. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the village, the traveler felt a sense of resolve. He was ready to face whatever came next, guided by respect, understanding, and the bond he had begun to form with the daughter. The village, the chief, and the ceremony itself were all watching, and he knew that his actions would matter, not only for him but for all those whose lives were connected to this moment. Even as evening approached, he felt a strange calm. The preparations had been completed, the lessons learned, and the stage set. Tomorrow would bring the culmination of the journey, the revelation that awaited behind the ceremonial veil. And though fear lingered, he understood now that courage was not the absence of it, but the willingness to face it with a steady heart. The morning of the ceremony arrived with a heavy stillness that hung over the village. The traveler awoke before the sun, his mind racing with thoughts of what the day might bring. He had spent the previous days learning, observing, and understanding the village's ways, but now everything was coming to a head. Today, he would face the culmination of the warnings, the preparations, and the so-called curse that had followed the chief's daughter for years. As he dressed in the ceremonial garments once more, he felt a tension in his chest, a mixture of fear and anticipation. The fabric was heavier than ordinary clothing, embroidered carefully with colors that symbolized respect and tradition. He adjusted it nervously, aware that the villagers' eyes would soon be upon him. The air in the village was quiet, as if holding its breath, waiting for the events to unfold. The chief appeared at the entrance of his hut, his expression unreadable but commanding. "It is time," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You have learned what you must. You have observed, listened, and prepared. Now you will see her fully. This moment will test not only courage but understanding and heart." The traveler nodded, swallowing hard. His thoughts turned to the daughter, whose calm presence had guided him through the preparations. He remembered her words. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act with clarity and honesty. He tried to steady his breathing, feeling the weight of destiny upon him. The villagers gathered in the courtyard, forming a large circle around the ceremonial platform. Children sat quietly at the edges, their eyes wide with curiosity, while elders stood with solemn expressions, their hands folded in respect. The traveler felt the gaze of every person upon him, and it both unnerved and strengthened him. He realized that this moment was not just about him or the daughter. It was about the village, their history, and the balance they had preserved for generations. The daughter appeared, dressed in ceremonial garments of her own. She moved gracefully, her eyes calm but filled with a depth that made the traveler's heart race. The villagers stepped back slightly, creating a clear path to the platform. The daughter approached him slowly, each step deliberate, her presence commanding yet gentle. The chief stood beside her, holding a small cloth in his hands. He spoke quietly, addressing both the traveler and the daughter. "This is the moment of revelation," he said. "The veil will be lifted. You will see the truth and the choice will be yours. Remember what you have learned, traveler. Fear clouds judgment. Understanding guides the heart." The traveler's hands trembled slightly as he watched the chief lift the veil. For days he had imagined what he might see, something frightening, strange, or cursed. Every story he had heard, every warning, had filled his mind with images of terror. Yet now, standing in the sunlight, facing the unknown, he felt a strange mixture of dread and hope. As the veil rose, the traveler froze. His breath caught in his throat, and for a moment the world seemed to stop. Before him was not a monster, nor a figure of fear, but a young woman whose beauty and presence were both startling and impossible to ignore. Her face was calm, her eyes deep and clear, and there was a light in them that seemed to hold 1,000 stories. He blinked several times, trying to make sense of what he saw. It was as if the stories he had heard were meant to prepare him for fear, but the reality was something entirely different. The so-called curse was not in her appearance, nor in any power she wielded, but in the misunderstanding and fear that had grown around her over the years. The traveler realized that all the warnings, all the tales of vanished men, had been shaped by superstition and misinterpretation. The daughter's gaze met his, and in that moment, he felt a connection that went beyond words. There was no threat in her eyes, only honesty and a quiet strength. He could see the weight of isolation and misunderstanding she had carried all her life, and he felt a mixture of awe, sympathy, and admiration. For the first time, he understood the depth of her experience, the resilience required to live under the shadow of fear and legend. The villagers watched silently, their expressions serious but expectant. The traveler understood that this revelation was not just his to experience. It was a moment that connected him to the entire village, to their stories, their fears, and their respect for the daughter. He felt the gravity of the situation pressing down on him, yet there was also a strange clarity, a sense that he now saw the truth behind the veil, both literally and figuratively. The daughter spoke softly, her voice steady and calm. "Do you see now?" she asked. "The curse is not in me, but in the fear that shapes stories. You have learned, traveler, but understanding comes not from seeing alone. It comes from the heart, from willingness to accept truth without judgment." The traveler nodded slowly, still trying to steady his breath. He realized that the test was not one of bravery in the face of danger, but bravery in the face of misunderstanding, fear, and expectation. He had arrived expecting terror, but what he found was clarity, compassion, and strength. He felt a surge of respect for the daughter and a deep sense of responsibility for the choice he would soon make. The chief stepped forward, his hands folded, his expression solemn. "The choice is yours," he said. "You have seen her, you have learned, and now you must decide. Remember, this is not about fear or desire alone. It is about honesty, understanding, and courage in the face of truth." The traveler's mind raced. He thought of the days he had spent in the village, observing, learning, and understanding the subtle ways in which life and respect intertwined. He thought of the daughter, her strength, her kindness, and the weight she carried from years of isolation and misunderstanding. He understood that his decision would not only affect him, but the balance of the village and the lives of many who depended on its harmony. Time seemed to stretch, the air heavy with anticipation. The traveler felt the eyes of the villagers, the calm presence of the daughter, and the weight of the chief's words all pressing upon him. His heart pounded, but there was also a strange sense of clarity. He realized that the courage required now was different from the courage of battle or survival. It was the courage to face truth, to act with understanding, and to embrace the responsibility of choice. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. The veil had been lifted, and the truth was before him. The fear that had shaped his imagination for days dissolved, replaced by a profound respect for the daughter and the life she had led. He saw not a curse, but a reflection of human misunderstanding, a story shaped by fear and legend rather than reality. Slowly, he stepped forward, meeting the daughter's gaze. There was no hesitation in her eyes, only quiet strength and expectation. The traveler felt a surge of determination. He understood now that his choice was not merely about marriage or survival. It was about accepting truth, showing respect, and embracing the courage that came from understanding rather than fear. The villagers watched silently, their expressions serious but approving. They had prepared him for this moment not through threats or warnings alone, but through guidance, patience, and observation. The traveler realized that he had been tested not by the daughter herself, but by the stories, the traditions, and the lessons woven into the life of the village. As the sun rose higher, casting light across the courtyard, the traveler made his decision. He would stay, he would face the future with honesty and respect, and he would embrace the truth he had seen. The veil had been lifted, and with it came clarity, courage, and understanding. The daughter's eyes softened, a faint smile appearing on her lips. "You understand," she said. "Not all choices are easy, but the right ones are made with a clear heart. You have seen the truth, and now you must live it." The traveler nodded, feeling a mixture of relief, anticipation, and determination. He had faced fear, misunderstanding, and expectation, and had emerged with clarity and courage. The moment of revelation had passed, leaving him ready to face whatever came next. The chief stepped back, observing the two of them. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "you will begin the next stage of life together. The lessons you have learned will guide you, and the village will support you. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act with understanding. Remember this, traveler, and your path will be steady." As the villagers began to move away, returning to their homes and daily routines, the traveler remained on the platform for a moment, reflecting on everything he had experienced. The veil had been lifted, revealing truth, compassion, and strength. He understood now that fear had never been the real challenge. It had been the lack of understanding, the assumptions made without seeing reality. The daughter stood beside him, calm and steady, a guiding presence in the quiet aftermath. Together, they looked out over the village, knowing that the future held challenges, but also understanding, connection, and the possibility of harmony. The moment of revelation had passed, but its lessons would remain, guiding them both as they faced the next chapter of life. The day dawned quietly over the village, with the first rays of sunlight spilling over the hills and lighting the small huts with a soft golden glow. The traveler woke early, feeling a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. The previous days had prepared him for what lay ahead, but now the moment of final choice had arrived. Today he would decide the path that could change his life forever, not just for himself, but for the daughter and the village as well. He dressed carefully in the ceremonial garments once more. Each piece of cloth, each color, and each symbol carried meaning. He felt the weight of the village's expectations on his shoulders, but also a sense of responsibility that steadied him. This was not a simple decision. It was a commitment to truth, courage, and understanding. As he stepped outside, the cool morning air brushed against his face, and the sounds of the village waking up reminded him that life continued, even in the face of such a heavy choice. The chief stood at the edge of the courtyard, his presence calm but commanding. "Today you will make your choice," he said. "The path you select will determine not only your life, but the balance of this village and the life of my daughter. Choose with clarity, honesty, and respect. Fear will only cloud your mind." The traveler nodded, feeling his heart beat faster. He had seen the daughter fully now, had learned about her life, her strength, and the misunderstanding that had surrounded her for years. He had observed the village, the traditions, and the care with which they upheld their way of life. Everything had led to this moment, the choice that could not be postponed. The villagers gathered in the courtyard, forming a large circle around the ceremonial platform. Their faces were serious but calm, and their eyes reflected hope, respect, and anticipation. The traveler realized that each of them had a stake in this decision. Their trust in him, their understanding of the daughter, and their hope for balance depended on his judgment. He felt a surge of responsibility, but also a growing sense of courage. The daughter approached him, her movements graceful and deliberate. She held her hands calmly at her sides, her eyes clear and steady. She did not speak, but her presence was enough to calm some of the fear that still lingered in his mind. He realized that she, too, had been living under pressure, carrying the weight of expectation and misunderstanding for years. Yet her strength was unwavering and her calmness gave him courage. The chief stepped forward and spoke, his voice steady and solemn. "The choice is yours, traveler. You have seen the truth, you have understood the lessons, and now you must act. Will you embrace this path with honesty and respect and walk forward with her? Or will you step away, leaving this place behind?" The traveler took a deep breath, closing his eyes for a moment. He thought of the past days, of learning, observing, and understanding the daughter and the village. He remembered her words about courage and clarity, about fear and truth. He realized that the challenge was not simply to act, but to act with understanding and integrity. The fear that had filled his imagination was gone, replaced by respect, compassion, and a sense of purpose. Opening his eyes, he looked at the daughter. She met his gaze steadily, showing no fear, only trust and patience. The traveler felt a wave of emotion, relief, admiration, and a quiet determination. He understood that his decision was not just about surviving or fulfilling a duty, but about embracing truth and respect, about walking a path of courage that required heart as much as mind. "I will stay," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I will face the future with honesty and I will embrace the truth I have seen. I will walk this path with you." The daughter's eyes softened and a faint smile appeared on her lips. "You understand," she said quietly. "Not all decisions are easy, but the right ones are made with clarity, courage, and respect. Your choice shows that you see not only me, but the life and the lessons around us. We will face the future together with honesty and trust." The villagers stirred quietly, a collective breath released. There was approval in their eyes, a sense of relief and hope. The traveler understood that his decision had not only shaped his own life, but had reaffirmed the balance and harmony of the village. The chief stepped forward, placing a hand lightly on the traveler's shoulder. "You have chosen wisely," the chief said. "It is not enough to face danger or fear. True courage comes from understanding, from seeing clearly, and from acting with respect. You have done this, and you will find that life rewards those who act with heart as well as mind." The ceremony continued, though it was no longer filled with tension or fear. Instead, it carried a sense of calm, unity, and shared understanding. The traveler and the daughter stood together on the platform, surrounded by villagers whose respect had been earned through observation and patience. The day's events were no longer about curses or threats, but about trust, connection, and the affirmation of life's truths. As the sunlight poured into the courtyard, the traveler felt a deep sense of peace. He had faced the unknown, understood the lessons, and made a choice not based on fear, but on clarity and respect. He realized that courage was not measured by daring acts alone, but by the ability to embrace truth, navigate uncertainty, and act with understanding and compassion. The daughter guided him through the final steps of the ceremony, showing him the traditions, the gestures, and the words that symbolized commitment, respect, and connection. Each step was deliberate, meaningful, and filled with significance. The traveler felt that he was not only participating in a ceremony, but becoming part of a story that had been written long before his arrival, a story of trust, courage, and the balance of life. The villagers continued to watch, their eyes reflecting pride, hope, and quiet joy. Children played quietly at the edges, elders nodded approvingly, and the chief observed with calm satisfaction. The traveler understood that the lessons of the village had been about more than tradition, they had been about life itself. The path of courage, understanding, and respect was now his to walk, not just in the village, but wherever his life might take him. As the ceremony drew to a close, the traveler and the daughter stood together in the center of the courtyard. The sunlight bathed them in a warm glow, highlighting the bond that had formed through trust, observation, and mutual understanding. He realized that the fear and rumors that had once clouded his thoughts were no longer present. What remained was respect, admiration, and a willingness to face the future with honesty and heart. The chief spoke one final time, his voice calm but carrying weight. Remember, traveler, that life is not without challenge, but it is guided by courage, understanding, and respect. You have chosen well, and your actions will honor not only yourself but this village and its people. Walk forward with clarity, and your path will remain strong. The traveler nodded, feeling a sense of fulfillment and readiness. He had faced the culmination of fear, misunderstanding, and expectation, and had emerged with clarity and courage. The choice he had made was not easy, but it was right, not for safety, not for convenience, but for truth and respect. The villagers slowly dispersed, returning to their daily lives, yet there was a quiet celebration in the air. The balance of the village had been affirmed, the lessons of courage and understanding upheld, and the traveler had become a part of the story he had once only observed. As evening fell, the traveler and the daughter walked through the village together. The air was filled with the soft sounds of life, birds returning to their nests, the rustle of leaves, and the gentle voices of villagers preparing for night. The traveler felt a deep connection, not only to the daughter, but to the people, the traditions, and the wisdom that had guided him through the trials of the past days. He realized that the so-called curse had never been real. It was a reflection of fear and misunderstanding, magnified by stories and assumptions. What had been real was the strength, wisdom, and courage required to live with truth and honesty. The daughter had lived with this lesson her entire life, and now he would walk beside her, ready to face the world with the same clarity and courage. As the stars appeared in the sky and the first night winds blew gently through the village, the traveler understood that life was not defined by fear or legend, but by the choices made with heart, respect, and understanding. He had chosen wisely, embraced truth, and accepted the responsibility that came with courage. The future was uncertain, yes, but it was also full of promise, connection, and the potential for a life lived with clarity and respect. The daughter looked at him, her eyes calm and steady, and he knew that their journey together had just begun. The village, the chief, and the lessons learned would guide them, but the path forward was theirs to walk. He felt a deep sense of peace, a sense that he had arrived at the right choice, and a quiet excitement for the life that awaited them both. In that moment, the traveler understood the true meaning of courage and choice, not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act with understanding, honesty, and respect. The legend of the curse faded, replaced by a story of life, trust, and the enduring strength of the human heart.